in the book of Daniel, there are so many intrigues and so many stories, biblical stories of interest. And I'm just going to be focusing on Daniel himself and the person of Nebuchadnezzar. Honestly, it's a very interesting portion of the Bible. First we found out that the children of Israel, they were on the other side of God. Whenever they are on the other side of God, they are saying somehow that God is not defending them, and so He leaves them. He just leave them, and the enemy will conquer them. But this particular one is prophetic, that they will go into captivity. And so Israel went into captivity, and Daniel was amongst the princes that was in captivity. And one of the first things to see here is that Daniel was amongst the princes sought. So Nebuchadnezzar was not just a dictator, but he was a man with class. He just didn't want to recruit people for spiritual sake. He recruited people of repute, people who were princes in their former lands, and he's somebody who is conscious of class and somebody who is conscious of recruiting quality people. And so, as far back as then, he said he was looking for people who were good in mathematics and science. And so, this was one of the criteria. So, when you think that, you look at it today and you think that people just drop criteria to employ, it's not just starting today, Nebuchadnezzar, the maximum dictator that ruled the whole world. I think he was the only ruler that ever ruled the whole world. Everyone, the Bible says, everything was under him, both animals and human beings. And so he sought for people. He had his criteria, to work with him at that capacity. And he was seeking people of capacity, in which eventually Daniel and his colleagues were among, and the criteria, like I said, was mathematics, science, and spirituality. And so when these people too were recruited, there were a lot of challenges along the line. After their recruitment, there were a lot of challenges. The man dreamt a dream and forgot his dream. And now he needed somebody to tell him his dream. To tell him his dream. Otherwise, he passed a total judgment, the judgment of death, to every spiritual person. So, and they were going to kill Daniel and his colleagues. And there was nothing anybody could do about it. That's Nebuchadnezzar. Total dictator, maximum dictator, the whole world. And so Daniel and his colleagues were sought, but somehow Daniel sought the God of heaven for a response. And Daniel got the response. He got it. No one seeks God and goes empty. And I always encourage people, look at the scriptures. You will see what you want. You will see what you need. But if you are looking at what you want, you also see it. But what you need is better than what you want, because what you want at the end of the day may not benefit you. Anyway, looking at Daniel in that light, he scaled that, and he began to get promotions. He was promoted at one time as one of the preferred presidents, and somehow some of the other presidents ganged up against him, and he was set up. Another story of God's deliverance. But I want us to also focus on something else. I want us to look at the person of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was someone who was supposed to, if you look at the character of God, you will see that he's supposed to repulse God, because he's somebody very proud. He made an image of himself and asked everyone in every race, every tribe, to worship it, bow down before that image. And anyone who will not bow down before the image, his house will be made a dunghill, and he was going to kill everybody. Total pride and total rebellion against God. But somehow, you look at this kind of man and you begin to understand the character of God, that God does not write people off. He doesn't just write people off. He doesn't, because of a one-off action or because of what you did at one time or the other, just write you off. And so, what happened? At a point, this Nebuchadnezzar went on what I would call an industrial training. Somehow he was banished from his palace because of the way he exalted himself above God. He was taken away from his palace, taken to the bush, and he was like an animal for 7 good years. 7 years. He was like an animal. And you know what? His palace, his powers, everything about him was still waiting for him. All his counselors, all his princes, everyone that waited for him, all the files, the whole world files was still waiting for him. And what happened? Why did God take such a decision? Of course, this man was rebellious and he was always in attack. He was always attacking the personality of God. He was struggling against the personality of God. Somehow, I think God just felt, look, let me teach this guy a lesson. And he was taken into exile. He was like an animal. He was like a chimpanzee that would beat his chest. His claws grew out like the claws of tiger and all the wild cats, and the Bible says he was eating grass like the oxen for 7 good years. And after 7 years, his reasoning, the Bible says his reasoning came back, and he came back to town. He became a human being again, although he was never a full beast, but he was just an animal. He was like an animal, that was being taught, a human being that was being taught a lesson, And so when he came back, everything he left was waiting for him. Can you imagine that? Everything he left was waiting for him. And he came back, he was a king again. He came back to his kingship again. And, he continued ruling. So I continue to look at things like this and say, how awesome is God? How mighty are his judgments? How does he think? Of course, we know the character of God from the scriptures. And these are some of the characters of God you see. The Bible is there just to show us this is the character of God. This is the way he behaves. He doesn't write people off. He doesn't say, oh, this one, I'm through with him. So God is not through with you. He's not over for you. Nebuchadnezzar came back, worshiped God, and he was back, he was restored. I'm believing God for your own restoration. And I know your restoration is soon. Thank you very much.